This is part 5 of our Yamaha tank restoration for Luciano. I've let this dry overnight. I'm a believer in, even though it's not totally necessary, I'm just old school about it, I let every coat of paint dry overnight. Now here's something that I wanted to put this information on the video. This is the paint Luciano uses, and this paint seems to be okay, but there's a couple of quick little tips you can be aware of. If you paint something, and let's assume it's this gas tank, because I thought this is good information worth putting on. Now everybody knows about a pint of this paint, which is what it would take to paint this, is about $40. This can is about $4 or $5, maybe $6 at the Lowe's or Home Depot. So when you don't need a whole pint, in this case, one can is fine. But here's a problem that I've run into already, that when you do backmasking and you get to these thin corners, and I'm going to show this in real time, where the two corners come together, this paint, the adhesion is such that if you're not really careful, right at the corner it pulls up that little corner. And then I have to do a touch-up, which is why I had to go get the paint from Luciano's, and why I've got to do the touch-up once I pull the tape off. And then this will be ready for the clear. But here's what Luciano and I have found out. You can take this paint, and Larry found this out too. He painted a Ducati part with similar paint, and then put urethane clear on it. Now, the trick was, if you use this paint, let it dry at least a week, because it's soft. If you notice when you use it, the next day you can put your fingernail in it. Well, you go try to put your fingernail in the paint of automotive paint. Doesn't happen. So what happens, this paint is very soft. Another thing, you want to try not to put more than you really need to cover. You don't want to, if it covers in 2 coats, don't put the 3rd coat on, because the thicker you build this paint up, it gets softer and mushier. It gets to be jello-y, or however you want to describe it. Anyway, but it is usable, and this is the point. If you have something, if it's not a priceless restoration like all of our bikes, we're all priceless here in our own way. The idea is, if you let it dry a week, it seems to be doable, and you put clear urethane on top of it. Now, I've come to the conclusion that this is fine as long as you're not going to do fine, pointy little stripes. If you do one big broad stripe, it's not a problem. But when you do little fine, tiny, like the corner of that X, when you do those little stripes, it can be a problem. And it was a problem on this job. And that's, of course, why we share the information and why I wanted to put this on the video. So we have had this dry overnight. I've got touch-up paint. Next thing is to get out a hairdryer, warm up the tape as much as possible, and pull it back very carefully. Try to minimize the amount of paint we pull up, if any. Well, we know we're going to pull it up in the corner, because I already did one corner, and that was a problem. But now, automotive paint, not true. If I paint this white with automotive paint, the next day I can put these stripes on. It's no problem at all. In fact, they say you can put them on after 2 hours or 4 hours. Yeah, see, I'm just old school, and I've painted enough in my lifetime to know, when you have a problem, you always say, oh, why didn't I just let it dry for a little longer? Because each shop condition is different. And what happens with paint, they always do it at 72 degrees under 0 humidity. Well, my shop is probably 65 degrees and a lot of humidity. So the shop conditions determine how long the paint has to dry. But it's always good. It never ever hurts to let it dry longer than necessary. Longer is always better. In fact, some of the clear coats, you put the 2nd coat on within an hour, or you have to let it dry 24 hours before you put the coat on, or it'll just alligator skin up. So some good information I think you can use. If you're looking at this video, you're probably interested in doing some of this yourself and not paying some guy $1,000 to paint your sport bike. So the first step on any tape removal, especially if it's chilly in your shop, or if this has been outside, which it was for some part of the dry cycle, it's always good to just warm it up. Heat is always your friend. Now I'm going to be real careful. I won't make a 10-minute thing. I'll probably take 10 or 15 minutes to carefully pull this up, because I know when I'm dealing with Rust-Oleum, and again, each one, if this were automotive paint, I would be a little less careful. Although maybe not. But if you notice the heat, and it's never It's never to your disadvantage to have some heat on there. And I'll take the rest of this off with the heat very, very carefully. Another thing, when you're pulling back fine line tape, it's good to pull it right over. Don't pull it straight up. Pull it back. And I'll try to do a close-up of that when we get to the fine line part of this. What I wanted to demo is, I can't get the camera any closer than this, the fine line tape. And again, another trick. What I'm trying to do is share all the tricks I've learned in doing this for about over 50 years, that's for sure. Here's the best trick of all. Don't pull it up like this. Fold it right back, I don't know if you can see this, right back over on itself. And again, I'm using a lot of overkill in this because I know that Rust-Oleum is not really automotive paint. And I don't want to compromise, of course, any part of the job. Now I've got to pull that up. And so far, well, maybe it's our lucky day. I'm not sure. You know, there's one thing about the lucky day. You never can tell when it's your lucky day. I'm pulling up the back mask, and again, I'm pulling these up. The heat has really been my friend here. But I wanted to mention one other thing. The reason most of the time you see a factory paint job, it'll end right at the edge. It'll end 1/8 of an inch from the edge because they put stickers on. They don't paint. Well, when you paint, you can go wrap it right around. And I just watched, and I know I said this on a video before, I watched an episode of Bitchin' Rides where the guy had well, some kind of hot rod car, a muscle car, and what he did, he took the stickers off, painted a very similar thing, but wrapped it around the door edges, and it made all the difference in the world. Now, once all the masking tape is off, and this is just an ordinary credit card, it could be an AutoZone card, it could be anything. What I want to do is on a 45-degree angle, I call it shaving. This knocks the high point of the paint off. One thing to never do is, well, two things to never do. Never use sandpaper on those edges, or they bleed and they make a mess. If you just lightly shave it with a 45-degree angle, what that does is when you put the clear on now, you don't have a big step there. And right around here is where it's always going to be the worst, right around that edge. That's why the factory doesn't paint around edges. They're lazy and cheap. And especially if you go look at a really high-end bike and it's a fortune, and you look and they put stickers on, like stickers for a kid. No stickers, everything paint. Of course, then the bike would be $80,000 and nobody could afford it except maybe Luciano. So anyway, once that's done, and again, I'm being very careful. I washed my hands, make sure I don't want to get any fingerprints on this now if I don't have to. Because the touch-up phase of this, I have to go get Karen's little baby artist brushes and look for where this needs to be touched up. If there's any overspray, I can sometimes just take a Q-tip and a little bit of toothpaste and clean it up. Now, this doesn't look too bad. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. But as good as that may look, I want to make it even better. Now, a couple of tips on touch-up. What I did, I sprayed that Rust-Oleum into a bottle cap and poured it into a little touch-up. This is one of Karen's little artist brushes, and these are a couple of bucks. These are like $3. And what this is good for, and you never want to use these really cheesy brushes, you need one good quality brush to get in all the corners and angles and edges. And here's another tip. Do the white first, get all the white touched up, and there are several little spots. And then I'll go with black automotive paint and touch up any spots that are black. And then, or actually what I should do is if there are no yellow spots to touch up. So if I did have a yellow spot to touch up, I'd go from white to yellow to black and really clean the brush well. What you don't want to do is go backwards, black, yellow, and then at the end of it you're doing white and there's still some residue in the brush. Always go from the lightest color to the darkest color. But once that's touched up, then I think it's going to go pretty well. Now we're coming down a home stretch here as far as the touch-up goes. And this is one step I know a lot of people leave out, but in the final job, I think it's going to pay. And these little baby brushes are really, if you try to do this with a cheesy brush, good luck. Boy, it's difficult. These little brushes allow you to make a nice point even. And believe it or not, this is a very, very difficult, it looks easy when it's done, but it's a difficult paint job to do. It really is a lot more complex to get everything just to flow the way you want and to match up and line up and then wrap around the front. I think we got it. Now, I had a little concern, and I'm sure it's overkill, that because of these little white, the white is Rust-Oleum. This is automotive paint. This will be dry in 10 minutes, but I'm wondering those little spots if they're going to be a problem when I put the clear on, and it's a good day to spray some clear. So maybe what I'll just do is see how this clear is going to lay out. Again, this is the kind of thing, you know, there's only a couple of spots in the white, and they feel dry to the touch. I've let it dry for about an hour, but you never do know when you're dealing with some unknown paint. A paint that you don't use all the time. But the automotive stuff, right now, then there'll be no problem with the automotive stuff. The only potential thing is that the problem we have with the Rust-Oleum touch-ups. All right, we're firing up the compressor. I'm going to take a chance. This has dried a couple hours now. And it's a really nice day for painting. There's no breeze and no real high gloss sun, so I'll be able to get a nice coat of clear. Get the base coat, 2 coats of clear, about 15-20 minutes apart, and then we put this aside to dry and hope the Rust-Oleum doesn't cause any issues at all. And the first step on this is going to be to try to get the edges. And as always, the clear changes the color slightly. And as we start the job, the wind starts blowing. It was calm all morning. Oh, maybe it's not my lucky day. You know, what we're going to do is we're going to let this tack up for about 15-20 minutes. We'll have a cup of coffee, come back to it, and put a second coat on. Okay, time for our second coat. Yeah, this is going to lay down. On small parts like this, I like to use the touch-up gun, my fabulous $9 touch-up guns. If I'm doing a fairing, I like to use the bigger guns, but there's a lot more control on this. Getting around the corners and edges and trying to avoid getting any runs as possible. the thing with that, it's not quite 70 degrees, about 65 degrees. That's gonna put that in the garage. It's gonna sit in the garage overnight, and we'll come back and look at. It looks pretty good right now. I always like to do what I call the purple look. Look around and see if we see any spots that. Look at this. I see a bug got in there. Well, we're gonna sand that out anyway. That's why it's good to get it in the garage as soon as possible. There's a lot less bugs in the garage than there are out here. The sooner we can get it in the garage, the better. But as I've said before earlier on in the video, this looks like a real easy paint job. It isn't. But the reward is when this is all put together, that's going to look pretty nice. Yeah, I think we got this, except for this bug. Can you believe this? And you don't dare. See, one of the things, years ago I would go get a razor and try to get him out. They'd put a gouge in the yellow. You're way better off if you just let him sit. We're going to sand this coat of clear out before we put the last coat on. This is really the base coat clear, but basically that's all we're going to get done today. Well, I guess he just wants to say goodnight to his twin brother over here. And if you think this paint job wasn't labor intensive to do, it's all on video. It's all on those videos from years and years ago. But this one I think is going to be really, really nice when he gets this all put together. Luciano, that's going to be really, really nice. Anyway, that's the end of part 5, and we'll pick this up next time. Next set is we're going to have to wet sand this out and put the final coats of clear on. And we'll do that on part 6. And hey, in case I didn't say it, thanks for watching. Now this is the beginning of part 6. Today's little goal is going to be to take some 1000 grit sandpaper, get some hot soapy water, and get all of these edges knocked down. Any little imperfections that are in the paint, the dust, any bugs that have flown in overnight, any flies, snakes, dinosaurs. You never know until you start sanding it out and getting it block sanded. A critical step. Then, if today turns out to be, because I'm doing this early in the morning, if it turns out to be a paintable day, we'll get the final coat of clear on this. Now, one of the things we've really come to love is this. This is the Portuguese sandpaper, and this is one of our favorites. Now, what I want to do, I just want to roughly get any little imperfections out of here. Most of all these little, the tape edges have a little rough edge on them still, even after 2 coats of clear. This will just be a little time consuming. And any little dust that got in the paint. When you're painting without a spray booth, which of course we always are, you always have little stuff flying into the paint. But in the final coat of clear, what I'll do is I'll wait till hopefully it's early in the morning when the wind isn't blowing, get that coat of clear on even if it's really cold, and get it out in the garage. And what I did this morning, I got up early just to get a start on this, thinking maybe today will be that day, but you never know. That thing that I laugh about all the time, is it your lucky day like Dirty Harry? Well, sometime it isn't. That's the problem. Anyway, we have had good luck with this 1000 grit sandpaper. And by leaving out this step, you make it that you never really get that final coat of clear as flat as it could be or as easy to buff. Now, I don't know if Luciano is going to want to buff this out, but it'll have enough clear on it that he can buff it out at some future time. So again, all of this stuff that we do here, we try to put on the video what step 1, step 2, step 3 is, and then if you leave a step out, well, it's just not going to be quite as nice. But any extra time you do put in, at this point in time, every minute you put in shows up in that final product. And just for people that are curious about this stuff, You may be thinking, well, why don't you just put 3 coats on, one right after another, and skip this step? And I thought I'd mention, yeah, you could do that, and then when you come times to do the final buffing on the part, or the final sanding, and you have that choice of doing it. See, a lot of people think, here's my point, a lot of people think, well, why don't you just wait till the whole bike is all put together, and then the final coat, sand it with 2000, 2500 and buff it. Well, if you skip this step, a lot of times you get a lot of little funny little spots in it. The paint isn't flat. And you see that a lot of times on people that take shortcuts. But by doing it this way, we've gotten out, and there was quite a few little, I call them little imperfections, but in this case, that final coat of clear, I think, is really going to be nice. And plus, we'll have 3 coats of clear on. The advantage of that is that if Luciano decides, and I think he will, to just run a buffing wheel over this, even a year later, even 2 years later, it's going to be beautiful. And actually, the longer you wait to buff it, the better in this case. I've always found that anyway. But by picking away now, not a good analogy, but one of the ways I look at it is like building a house. If you get the foundation straight, it's easier to get the wall straight. Then it's easier to get the roof on straight. But if the foundation's crooked and the wall, you wind up, it just makes you crazy anyway. Makes me crazy. Use that as my excuse. And as I go down here, now what I'm doing is, it's called candling. I hold it up to the light. I can see the reflection of the light. And I can see little spots that you probably don't even see on camera. But I see them. See, that's the important thing. Another thing too is, people that haven't watched a lot of these windy videos, we always work under fluorescent lights. No incandescent bulbs. That tends to show more of the mistakes early on, where it's relatively easy to correct them. Now, an example is if we were to sand through an edge or a corner here and have to touch it up, well, it wouldn't be a big deal right now because we're going to put more clear on. But if we waited till all the clear is on and then we sand through, bingo, it's a big job. It's a really big job, in fact. Anyway, that's block sanding out. The extra hour or 2 that are going to go into this for this extra step, and an extra hour to do the final coat of clear in the final product, I think it'll be well worth it. Now we're almost done with this. What I wanted to do, I wanted to show how candling works. Let's see if we can find a spot here first. Okay, right here where I'm pointing. If you look at that, first you got to wipe it. You'll see there's just the slightest, let's go up here. There's a little tiny imperfection. Let's see if we find a bigger one. So I wanted to show on video. Yeah, I've sanded, oh, here's one right on the corner. Right on that corner. But we've got 90% of it done. And by looking at it, this is what candling is. If you look at that right in here, there's going to be a shiny spot. I'm not sure you can see it on the, well, we'll see when we edit down a video. If you can see that, just a couple of swipes of the sandpaper and that'll be gone. Because what we're really looking for is to pick away at every little spot before we put that last little coat of clear on. And I hit an edge here. I'll just put a little touch-up paint on that, right on the corner. And we are pretty much closing in on another 10-15 minutes of sanding and cleaning up. This will be ready to spray. All right, touched up that little area in the back. Let that dry while I had a cup of coffee, and we are pretty much ready now. I'm just hoping that we can get this last coat of clear on without the wind blowing too bad. Well, we got to deal with a little bit of sand, a lot of it, but we'll get it done.
Well, if you were watching these videos from the very beginning when we were up at Luciano's measuring out the stripe, you'll realize how far we've come. And I hope some of the tips on these videos, oh, all of the videos I have, trying to share the information. If you want to do a job like that, yeah, you can always just pay somebody, but if you want to do it yourself and take the pride in it, well, that's just an extra level. As I'm looking at that, that actually is pretty good.
Well, as we're coming up on the end of this project, I'm just thinking to myself, wow, I think that's gonna really look nice on the bike Luciano's prepping up now. He's in the final parts of the restoration. We'll try to get some video of it when we'll actually get when it's all put together and when we go out for some test riding. But I just wanted to mention, for every person that I know, every person period, motorcycling is a different experience, a different passion. For me, I do enjoy working on making these small custom changes and restoring bikes that maybe were in a dumpster at one time. And of course having some new bikes that are just on the other end of that spectrum, and they're all fun. I just think when you don't like all motorcycles, you kind of cheat yourself out of something. But I think this is going to be a good one. And hey, I hope you've enjoyed watching. Thanks for watching. And share the passion of motorcycling, actually the passion of life. Thanks for watching.